Welcome back. You're watching Dukascopy TV and I'm Darren McDermott. Now, many are expecting the ECB to cut rates in June and impose negative deposit rates on reserves held by the central bank. I'm joined in the studio today by Dr. Frank Hollenbeck. Welcome back to the studio.
Hello, Darren.
So there's also talk about potential quantitative easing, bailout bonds. But Frank, what are you actually expecting to see?
Well, it's somewhat surprising that the ECB is undertaking these actions. We can bring a horse to a trough, a pond, a lake, but we can't make him drink. By imposing a negative deposit rate, the goal is essentially to make banks make bad loans. Okay, and in the case of quantitative easing, we have ample evidence from Japan and the United States that it's not been effective, and it's actually created an enormous amount of unintended consequences, such as stock market bubble or bum bubbles or even real estate bubbles. Okay, and we have a situation in Europe where we basically have a runaway train with a certain train wreck in the future. Okay, in the sense that what we have is debt to GDP ratios continue to rise. We have many European countries who have debt to GDP ratios above 100%. Okay, and you would need to have growth of 3% just to keep those ratios stable. Okay, but we've seen that countries such as Italy have had an average growth rate of only 1% for the last 3 decades. Okay, that's why this concept of bringing your budget deficits down to 3% is totally meaningless. It just means slow death. Now, what would ultimately happen is that we would have a breakup of the euro. Okay, and each country would go off and follow its own monetary policy, in the sense that Italy would go back to the lira and it would print basically to reduce its government debt. What the ECB is doing is basically it's doing the quantitative easing and is going to ultimately destroy the euro's medium of exchange and store value function. Okay, if I was Germany, I would be really questioning what the what is the purpose of the ECB's current action. I think it's essentially to avoid the executioner's acts. And
looking at growth, the Eurozone had pretty poor figures for the very first quarter, but Germany now was very strong. So in terms of growth figures and trends, are you expecting this trend to continue?
Well, for the euro area, growth was only 0.2% in the first quarter. And if we look at growth throughout Europe, we see that it was about 0.9%, but that's primarily because of good growth numbers in the UK and Sweden. Okay. Now, we have to recognize that we have a two-tier Europe. We have Germany and the northern countries doing relatively well, and southern countries continuing to contract. Okay. Now, going forward, will Germany continue to be the locomotive for the rest of Europe? And my answer is no. The reason is that Germany is dependent more on its exports to outside Europe than inside Europe. And I actually wrote an article on this where I actually indicate that Germany since 2007 has cut its surplus with other European countries by half, but has tripled its surplus with other countries. And we know that both Russia and China are slowing, okay? And a lot of exports go to those two markets, okay? For example, we know that 6,200 German companies do business with Russia. 300,000 people in Germany, their jobs depend on Russian exports. And we know that Russia is Germany's 11th largest export market and its 7th largest import market. Okay, and Germany imports a lot of its energy needs. Okay, 70% of its energy needs are imported, of which 25% come from Russia. So any slowdown in China and Russia, which is almost a certainty now, is going to slow growth in Germany. So it's not going to be the locomotive that everyone anticipates for the rest of the year.
Dr. Frank, as always, we love having you in the studio. We love to hear all your views, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
And thank you for tuning in to Dukascopy TV. Now do stay tuned as we have lots of interviews just like this one heading your way. Goodbye for now.